We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live. Boxingego unpack. Yeah. We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live.
Hey. Baby. You want baby? I know that. Canelo Alvarez has some competition. UFC Riyadh season. We're going to talk about it. Canelo Alvarez, he's fighting Edgar Berlanga. I don't know what you guys think about the fight, but we know Canelo Alvarez now has some competition. So let me break it down. UFC just announced their actual card. Sean O'Malley is the headliner, September 14th. Noche UFC Riyadh season title fight with Sean O'Malley. The first ever fight in the Vegas sphere. And if you notice the date, this is Mexican Independence Day weekend in Las Vegas, again at the Sphere, and it's going to be in direct competition with Canelo Alvarez, who fights on that same exact date. Canelo, his fight was officially confirmed yesterday. He's fighting Edgar Berlanga, and also on the card you have Danny Garcia and Edislandi Lara, possibly Cool Boy Fulton, and some other people. So very interesting for a few reasons. Well, one, it's kind of a sign of, almost sign of the times. Canelo Alvarez, at one point, I feel like it wouldn't even be wise. I mean, I don't even know if it's wise right now, but in general, Canelo was considered the face of boxing, and you didn't really want to rival his date. You didn't want to go against his date, especially in the same city. If anything, you've seen the fight with Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney. Golden Boy thought they had a good fight, but they didn't want to be a fight in Vegas that close to Canelo versus Munguia, which was going to happen a few weeks later, because the Ryan Garcia Devin Haney fight was 420, April 20th. Canelo fought like May 4th or whatnot, Cinco de Mayo weekend. So now the UFC, they just announced, and Dana White has already been on record. He said he don't care if Canelo's fighting unless he's fighting Benavidez, which you see on the screen. Canelo's not fighting Benavidez. So it'll be interesting because now Canelo, he doesn't look like people are respecting that date. Because one thing I know for sure, if Floyd Mayweather was fighting under Money Mayweather after he beat Oscar De La Hoya, fighting in his prime, the UFC would not go against that. It just, he was too powerful. And if you've ever been in Vegas for Floyd fight weeks, you can attest to this. It just would have been bad business for the UFC to try to stage, a Sean O'Malley or whoever on the same exact day. So again, sign of the times. The UFC, they say they tired of waiting and they're not holding out. They don't really care that Canelo Alvarez is competing. They're like, business as usual. We're just gonna run our event. And I think this is also because of Canelo. I think part of it's Canelo's fault because he keeps choosing rivals that the world in general hasn't really asked for. But I want to talk about something else also that was interesting to me. And this is from ESPN. This is directly from ESPN. The Sphere is a brand new building, so it's probably expensive to rent out that facility, which is why maybe the UFC hasn't done any cards there. That is being sponsored by Turki Al-Sheikh and Riyadh season. So the UFC is working with the Saudis to make that a reality, because other than that, that would be, really expensive. And then you would have to look at your ROI, can a fight with UFC 306 or whatever without Riyadh season, would the UFC make enough money to justify that facility? Because there's other great venues in Vegas, you know, MGM Grand, T-Mobile, blah, blah, blah. But because it's being sponsored and you're getting cash flow from the Saudis, then I guess that partnership allows for it to happen. So this is what Turki Al-Sheikh is saying. Quote, "I will give Canelo what I think is a fair price." Al-Sheikh said, "If he accepts, he deals directly with me to finish the deal. I don't want anyone in the middle. I guaranteed Terrence Crawford a big fight. I want Canelo for Crawford, and Crawford wants Canelo. But if Canelo is crazy with his financial demands, I will still guarantee Crawford any fight he wants." Al-Sheikh has delivered 5 boxing events since he took a hold of the boxing industry in October with Tyson Fury and Ngannou. His biggest boxing match was the Usyk Fury Undisputed Championship fight in May. So it's very interesting. Turki is saying that he wants Canelo to fight Crawford, which I'll give you my opinion on that in a second. But first, this is what he said in that same ESPN interview. And this is the part that I found kind of interesting, because as I stated at the beginning of this video, they're basically competing. Canelo and PBC, Amazon Prime and DAZN, they have a fight card because the fight will be made available on Amazon Prime and it will be made available on DAZN on their platform because of Berlanga. He's with Eddie Hearn in Rematch Room. So the interesting thing here is what Turki Al-Sheikh said. He said he wants to still make the Crawford fight, but then another portion of that article, it says Turki Al-Sheikh is sponsoring UFC 306, which I just mentioned to you, making it possible to put on an expensive event at the Sphere, which I already went over. And when he was asked about going heads up with Canelo Alvarez on that date, you know, UFC 306, going heads up with Canelo Berlanga card, he says, and I quote, "We will eat him," he told ESPN about going head to head with Canelo. And then it says Al-Sheikh still wants to make Canelo Crawford perhaps the biggest fight in boxing. I don't know if it's the biggest fight in boxing. Me personally, I really don't even want to see it. And I've already explained why. Maybe I'll spend a little bit of time. But I just find it interesting, that comment specifically, because he says he wants to work with Canelo, but then he has an event, UFC 306. He's working with Dana White to put up this card, and then you're competing directly with Canelo, as I mentioned. So I'm interested to see how this all unfolds and plays out. And money talks, you know, money talks. Maybe they can make the number right for Canelo. The other thing that's interesting is the mere fact that Canelo already gave Crawford an answer and says there's no gain in the fight and making the fight with Crawford. Crawford's too small. He won't get credit for it, yada, 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 which is what I said in the beginning, why I don't particularly want to see the fight. I don't know what Riyadh season's plans are, or Turki Al-Sheikh. You know, he said he's promised a good fight. I mean, a fight like that is just, I'm not a fan. I'm old school. I'm not a fan of like weight class jumping and moving around and stuff like that. And it just makes all the sense in the world. Here's an example. When Floyd Mayweather said Terrence Crawford should fight David Benavidez, people clutched their pearls and they were gasping. They're like, oh my God, how could Floyd say that? Right? And this is when Benavidez was at 168, right? So the thought of Crawford fighting David Benavidez made people gasp, and it was preposterous. But then Canelo, who just was undisputed, he just got stripped of his IBF title, but he's fought there, several fights there. People are saying they want to see that fight. I find that a bit weird. So you want Terrence Crawford to fight the 168-pound champion in Canelo, but a former 2X champion David Benavidez, who people say Canelo has accomplished this much and Benavidez doesn't have a resume quite like Canelo's. Why would you be anti Benavidez versus Crawford? And the reason is because people know that Crawford ain't really a 168 pounder. So fighting a big, strong 168 pounder who has a size advantage in terms of height and arm reach, they're looking at that as like, no, that's too much. But since Canelo Alvarez has looked, you know, he's just not looked the greatest in some of his fights, like guys like John Ryder are going the distance and things like that, then it gives, I guess, Crawford fans hope that he can beat Canelo. And I don't know if he can beat Canelo or not at that particular weight, but I feel like it's really a double standard, and I'm not big on those in the sport of boxing. People wouldn't want to see Crawford fight David Morrell or David Benavidez. They'd be like, that's ridiculous. How could you say that? But then they want to see him fight an accomplished champion like Canelo Alvarez. So what makes Canelo Alvarez specifically and only a viable person? And see, again, now we're getting into the region in the area of why I don't like this weight class jumping stuff, because you're not really trying to move up to 168 and fight your way to a title shot. You don't want to fight at that weight. You want to like hit the lottery and go straight to Canelo, hope you could beat him, make a ton of money. And, you know, I don't know. I'm not that big on that particular premise. The other thing, like I said in this video, that's interesting is that you have Canelo competing with UFC in Riyadh season, because the UFC card is a Riyadh season card, and they're saying they'll eat Canelo, but then you want to do business with him. So I'm not sure. I know Canelo has made smart investments and he's made a lot of money, and I know the Saudis have a lot of money. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. The other thing for me is, call me old fashioned, Canelo has Berlanga. I do believe Berlanga definitely is not ready for Canelo, but he's a puncher. Canelo's shown signs of aging or, you know, wear and tear. Maybe he's not as quick or stamina's not as good as when he was younger or whatever. Plus, you got Terrence Crawford, who has an upcoming fight with Israel Madrimov. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me that people continue to stage, in their mind at least, stage all these future fights. But my premise is simple. If you don't beat what's in front of you, then all that future is out the window. So Canelo got to get past Berlanga, and sooner than that, in August, Crawford got to get past Madrimov. That's why, again, I'm not a big fan of this whole Crawford Canelo talk. I'm just being honest, like I always am. We haven't even seen Crawford in one fight at 154. Why are we talking about Crawford at 168 with a guy with a granite chin like Canelo Alvarez? Somebody needs to answer that in the comment section. I get the namesake. You know who Canelo is. You know who Crawford is. But this seems like such a casual fans type of dream of fights. I don't see why people are so fascinated with this. Like, here's another thing. If it wasn't Crawford and it wasn't Canelo, would you want to see anybody from 154 move up to 168 and fight David Morrell or David Benavidez? Just ask yourself that question. Like, I wouldn't really want to see it. And again, the exception for me, being old school, would be if you clean out, like if you have nowhere else, like let's say Broner. When Adrian Broner was at 135, he beat the rawest person at the time, which was Antonio DeMarco, and a champion. So he beat him effortlessly. Then he fought Gavin Reese. So he jumped up 2 weight classes and went towards money fights, because at the time there weren't really names at 135. The only other name he probably could have fought then was Ricky Burns, But if you know your boxing, Ricky Burns ducked Broner at that time. And then 140 wasn't a stacked division. Now fast forward to the future, 35 got Gervonta Davis and Shakur Stevensons, and 140 got top names like Pitbull Cruz and Gary Antoine Russell and Puellos and Teofimos. So there's a lot of youthful talent and action at 35 and 40. But when Broner was there and when Crawford was there, they couldn't really stay at 35 and 40 too long because they just weren't the names for them. So they had to pursue other things. So in Broner's standpoint, it made more sense when he jumped up to fight Paulie Malignaggi and then Maidana at 47, because 35 and 40 were pretty spent. They weren't deep divisions at that given time. So if he's Adrian Broner, this huge star and this name, he was looking for the big checks and the big opportunities. For me, I feel like for Crawford, there's so many other very good fights at 54, at even 60 maybe, that I would like to see those before we start talking about Crawford at 168. But again, I get it. You know, it's a business, money talks. Crawford is probably thinking about ending his career in the future. So he's probably just looking to cash out. So he don't want to go through. He feels like, I'm already a Hall of Famer. So he's not trying to go through the gauntlet again of, you know, fighting. Then he just wants the Willy Wonka golden ticket to Canelo. That's what it seems like to me. But for me, I much prefer Boots, even at 154. Have Jerron, because Jerron looked kind of sucked up at 147 in his last fight. So move up to 154, or at least for the one fight. Boots said in interviews that he would move up to 54 for Crawford. That's what I think Turkey and Riyadh season should focus on more so than the Canelo fight, right? In my personal opinion, I think Boots and Crawford is far more intriguing to me. Or even Jermell Charlo said he's coming back to 154. A lot of people wanted to see that Crawford versus Jermell Charlo. Probably let Jermell Charlo get a tune-up in while Crawford's fighting Madrimov and then try to stage that. So we'll see how it all plays out. But at the end of the day, you know, money talks. So we'll see what happens. But it is official. Riyadh season and UFC are going head-to-head, colliding with Canelo Alvarez. After that, Turkey and Riyadh season sounds like they want to strike a deal for Crawford and Canelo. I will say Crawford and Canelo is bigger. It's a bigger fight and a better fight than fights like Berlanga. That's for sure. So just so we're all on the clear, I do feel like that fight makes more sense than like a Berlanga. I don't know anyone that really asked for that. Let me know what you guys think. The Unpack.